My time at Union Congregational has had a number of moments of dread. And the reason for that is because I often sit here on this seat during the Music for Reflection and listen to these folks, and I think, I'm going to follow that. Oh my gosh. Oh. So we are grateful for the musical gifts of this congregation, grateful for the dramatic gifts of this congregation as they were in evidence on Friday night. Thank you, Jenny, Susan, Catherine, and all the other women who helped us go a little deeper on Friday night. I have sometimes difficulty feeling like I fit in. When I go to functions like weddings, you sit down with folks that you don't know at a table in a reception hall or after the rehearsal for the dinner. You sit down and folks inevitably ask you what you do for a living. And when I say, I'm the pastor of a church, that elicits a number of different reactions. The most common one, suddenly cleaning up your language, or wanting to dig around in the things you said at confession when you were 7 years old, or all these sorts of things. It is unusual to go to a function like a wedding where you don't know a lot of people and feel like you fit in immediately. In Asheville, North Carolina, a number of years ago, I attended a wedding rehearsal, and I sat down because Stacy, my spouse, was a bridesmaid, so I was there, and I sat down and just sort of waited patiently for the service to be rehearsed and done. And there was a gentleman sat beside me, and we struck up a gentle conversation. And he said, "So what do you do for a living?" I said, "I'm the pastor of a church." He said, "Oh, really? What kind of church?" I said, I'm the pastor of the United Church of Christ congregation. And he said, "Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that is absolutely superb. The United Church of Christ is a fine denomination." That man sat next to me was Hal Tausig, the gentleman who will be delivering our Still Speaking lecture on October 15th. Sometimes you do find a place to fit in. Even in Asheville, you find a place to fit in. Morgan, we hope and pray that as you grow and as you mature, you will find this church, this congregation, this culture that exists around church, this culture that celebrates the sacraments, baptism and communion, that proudly sometimes, freely celebrates the gifts of water and bread. May you find yourself at home in such a place and in such a culture. Even so, in this place and in this culture, we tell some funny stories, don't we? We tell some funny stories like that one that Nancy generously read for us a few moments ago. A story of a garden, a story of a rib, a story of a creator, a story that attempts to teach us not about the origins of evil, I would contend. A story that doesn't teach us much about any particular kind of fall. It doesn't really teach us anything about the origins of something like the devil. That is not at all what that story is trying to do. This story in Genesis is a story about community. It's about how we live together. It's about where we come from. It is about who is God and who isn't. This is a story about the creature-like nature of humans, that they're not solitary animals, that the help that the man needs can't be from just another creature. It has to be a particular kind. This man must not be alone, and the other creatures will not do. The news that exists in this entire episode is merely that in order to overcome loneliness, God creates and creates again and creates anew. The woman is God's free creation also. The two creatures of surprise, they belong together. We already see, even in this early stage of the book of Genesis, that the guardian is utopian not because of the relationship that the people had with something that could be called the devil, or because they reckoned with their sin or overcame their problems as individuals or overcame their weaknesses by pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps. No, this is a story of harmony. This is a story of harmony in the garden because there is a community of solidarity there, even among two people, where the people are differentiated, but they are of the same essence. There is trust in this garden. There is well-being in this place. The garden is the potentiality of human community where there is no shame and no need to feel ashamed. This is a narrative interruption for our lives, is it not? Just like baptism is a narrative interruption for our lives, being reminded that the true and best gifts of our life are small and usually free and beautiful, even while they're seemingly ordinary. No, this story in Genesis is about a garden, a place of harmony, a place where the gifts are free and beautiful. In 1996, I went off to college in Georgia. My first class was Religion 110, Introduction to Sacred Texts. The professor, Hoyt Oliver, one of my great heroes, one of the few people I've felt in my life that had it all together in some way or another. And by that I mean that he was just out there. We sat down in class that first day, and he said, what I want you to do is I want you to reach out and touch your neighbor's side, and I want you to count their ribs. So much better if a male reaches out and touches a female. I want you to count her ribs. And so I lifted my hand and pushed it towards a female who was sat next to me, and she looked at me and said, "Oh, no, you don't." That's okay, that's fine. In fact, most women had that reaction in the class. "Oh, no, you don't." He proceeded to tell us that, of course, men and women typically, traditionally, have the same amount of ribs. He proceeded to tell us that actually, this story is an etiology, the explanation of something else that is afoot. Folks, a number of years ago, were trying to figure out the reason for this and that and the other, and they told stories about this, that, and the other. He said that the word for rib in Genesis could actually be just as easily translated as baculum. Baculum is a penis bone. Human males are, in fact, one of the few male mammals, maybe the only male mammal, that does not have a penis bone as a standard part of our anatomy. To drive home the point, Dr. Hoyt Oliver liked to walk the halls of our university with a raccoon's penis bone attached to his nose. Like I said, he was a little out there. Folks, this place costs $50,000 a year to attend. Is that not troubling? So is this all this story is about? An etiology? Something that explains the cause of something? Something that just explains the absence of a bone? Surely not. Surely not. St. Augustine, right at the beginning of his Confessions, writes to God, "Tell me why you mean so much to me." This is a line that has haunted me for years. I look out at the world and I sometimes see ugliness. I see raw unfiltered evil. And I think, if there is a good God, then how can this exist? How can this be? How can the world be like this? And it's funny, I come to a place like this and I read the liturgy that starts, "O Creator," on a Sunday morning, and I begin to choke up, and I'm not always sure why. Tell me why you mean so much to me. I hold a little baby in my arms, a little baby. And I just put a little bit of water on her forehead and I choke back the tears and I wonder, what's going on? Why is this an emotional event for me? There are 7 billion of us on this planet holding one baby with a little bit of water. There are oceans of water out there. Why would this mean anything to me? Tell me why you mean so much to me. I hear the first few notes of Amazing Grace, and I choke back the tears. My voice catches in the first verse. Why? I've sang that song 199 times, perhaps. Tell me why you mean so much to me. I was undone when I first served my mother communion. Just a sobbing, crying mess on the chancel steps when I offered a piece of bread to my mother, that one who in today's money paid $50,000 a year to go to college, and I'm giving back a little piece of bread. Undone. Tell me why you mean so much to me. I was undone when my child first served me communion in our old congregation. Undone. Some folks went to Church World Service on Friday, learned about the plight of refugees around the world, about folks seeking a new life in other countries. We learned that it takes, at a minimum, 1,065 days for a person, when they first get processed, to when they arrive in the United States. 1,065 days, at a minimum, to get here. 1,065 days from beginning to end. We learned about the challenges that parents face when their children are struggling, and when they are struggling not just with stress but serious challenges. In addition to being a refugee of a war-torn place, we heard about a man who has a child who is on the autism spectrum and trying to raise that child in a refugee camp in Jordan, and the strain that exists on his marriage as a result of all the other things that are happening in his life. Perhaps because it was on my mind this week, and consider the image of a garden, and now see why perhaps folks may not give our Genesis text much of a glance. What does all this harmony, even if it is momentary, even if it is fleeting, what does this harmony have to do with our lives? And yet we come, we hold babies, we dab water, we make promises. We break bread and we give it to one another, and we tell each other that there's hope. We stand often on a Sunday morning and say, "May the peace of Christ be with you," and make some sort of affirmation about who we are and whose we are in this place. Liturgy, sacraments, church, prayer, these can elicit powerful emotional responses in me, and I'm not even sure why. I wonder if I'm just a sentimental mess, or just proudly nostalgic, or maybe it's just that I'm in need of an expression of grace because I haven't seen one in a short while. This week, oh gosh, I needed an expression of grace. I noticed around my own dinner table how we used to talk and how we talk now. Just 3 or 4 years ago, it was probably weeks that Stacy and I, my spouse and I, discussed what happened at Sandy Hook. And then the next one happened, and then it was days, and then the next one happened, and it was hours. I think now, as we gather together and talk as a couple, as a married couple, we're into the minutes side of things. Oh Lord, I need an expression of grace. Tell me why you mean so much to me. May we break bread together today. May we celebrate water today. May we celebrate peace today. May we celebrate God, the God who gives us a vision of a garden where people live in harmony and they need not feel shame and they need not feel ashamed. Oh God, give us an interruption this day. May God's peace be with you all. And so let us pray. Great God among us, we gather this morning to confess to you that even with signs of hope, even with rainbows of peace, even with proclamations of love around us, we have in our own hearts and in our own way let the ways of evil win. We have given in to cynicism. We have given in to hopelessness. We have given in to the ways of the world and let that narrative rule our lives. We confess to you, Holy God, that we need a garden of harmony to be proclaimed. We need a garden where there is no shame to live in our lives and in our hearts. We need a garden, Holy God, for us to focus on, for us to walk into, so that we may proclaim together that we will walk in the ways of faith, that we will acknowledge the paths of peace, and that we will, in faith and in our own ways, acknowledge that in you and with you, love always wins in the end. Help us, Holy God, to hold on to hope. Help us, Holy God, to celebrate babies and water. Help us, Holy God, celebrate the outward signs of inward graces. Amen.